Hello everyone, and welcome to the Outcast Engineer Melee Weapons tier list. Starting off in D tier, I've got the Axe. Now the Axe isn't a bad weapon on itself, it's not down here because it's a crap weapon. It's got armor piercing and shield breaking ability. It's really good for single target damage, but the problem being with Outcast Engineer, a lot of his weapons, they feel kind of slow, and since he's so squishy, he kind of needs like a weapon with some defensive properties, and this one has almost none. I think it's got 3 stamina. It's not fluent enough to deal with hordes. It's really just an elites only kind of weapon. So for that reason, I don't think it works pretty well on Outcast Engineer. I have it in the D tier. Also in D tier, I've got the Warpick. Now again, the Warpick's not a bad weapon, but the Warpick is very dependent on speed. Its charge attacks, they're great for elites. They can take out single elites, that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But its light attacks, even though they have the linesman modifier and can kind of deal with hordes, they're so slow. And on Outcast Engineer, you need a weapon that is fast enough to deal with hordes that you won't get hit between your swings. And the Warpick just doesn't provide that, unfortunately. Bumping up to C tier, I've got the Axe and Shield. Now, I love the Axe and Shield. I could use it on anybody. It's great defensively. You get a ton of stamina. Build it for 60 block cost reduction. You'll never die. But the problem is, this class is kind of intended to be like an all-out offensive thing. He's supposed to do tons of damage, buff the team. And if you're just worried about staying alive, this will get you through the map, but you're going to do pretty much your entire damage is going to be based around your crank gun, which you can only use for like a couple seconds at a time. So it limits your DPS ceiling there, which is unfortunate. But C tier for the Axe and Shield. Also in C tier, I've got the Hammer and Shield. Again, the same kind of problem here. Even though the Hammer and Shield has that sequence with the push attack, uppercut, light attack motion, where it will do a little bit more melee damage than the Axe and Shield, it still doesn't do enough, in my view, to warrant a higher tier ranking. Bumping up to B tier, I've got the Hammer. Now this is where we kind of start to get into the good weapons. The Hammer is pretty underrated, I think. It's got 4.5 base stamina. Its charge attacks are great for elites, and it's got a push attack that's pretty good. Has a linesman modifier. A couple of its light attacks, I think, have linesman modifiers, and it's got some uppercut motions which get bonus crit chance, so it can do some pretty decent damage, all the while being able to kind of keep up defensively for him. So yeah, I don't think it's an all-out great weapon. It's not amazing for shields. Obviously, its light attacks can't deal with armor, so it doesn't have armor piercing, but it has enough to make it a pretty good weapon. Solid B tier, in my view. Also in B tier, I've got the Great Axe. Now, I like the Great Axe, but the Great Axe, again, much like the Warpick, much like the regular axe there, requires a lot of speed to be used effectively. So it's great for elites, it's great for hordes, but on Outcast Engineer, in my opinion, it is just too slow. It also doesn't have any defensive properties. It's better offensively than the Hammer, but it's worse defensively, so it kind of evens it out in my head. So while it's better at some things, it's worse at other things, so they're really kind of on the same level. I like the Great Axe though. It's got armor piercing, shield breaking. Its light attacks are great for elites. Its charge attacks have the linesman modifier, good for hordes. It's just a little too slow. If you have superior gaskets and you use that a lot and time it with the Great Axe in that way, you'll get by. It'll be better, but without that, it's tough. It's a tough call. Up to A tier, I have 2 weapons. The first one is the Great Hammer. Now, the Great Hammer is one of my favorite weapons in the game. It's pretty good on all Barnes classes. It's got armor piercing for a hammer, which is amazing. Its charge attacks are great for hordes, so you can kind of crowd control that way. Its light attacks are perfect for elites. A couple hits, to the head of a Storm Vermin and he's dead. You can pretty much deal with anything with this weapon. And even though it has low stamina and doesn't really have defensive properties, much like the Great Axe, it has enough speed and enough stagger force and enough killing power that it'll kind of help you defensively. So, really great weapon here. Also in A tier, I've got the dual hammers. Now the dual hammers are, this is a DLC weapon by the way, they are fantastic for just about everything. Its light attacks are pretty quick. They can deal with hordes, you can make a bunch of temp health that way, really good. Its charge attacks are simple, they're easy to use, they're very player friendly. Pretty decent for elites, you gotta get the headshot, obviously, but it can do a little bit of everything, which is good. But the reason I have it so high is because of its base stamina. I think it's got like 4 base stamina, which is really good. That's a lot. So it's got good defensive capabilities while also being quite effective on the offensive side of the ball. So I like the dual hammers a lot. Up in S tier, if you haven't figured it out yet, it is the Cog Hammer. Now the Cog Hammer is fantastic. It's kind of like a 2-in-1 weapon. So on one side of the weapon, it's like the Great Hammer, with that flat kind of hammer surface, and on the other side, instead of another hammer surface, I don't know what to call it, it's like an axe, right? So the charge attacks, he flips the weapon to the axe part, and he just comes down on the head of whatever elite is unlucky enough to be in your way. And then the light attacks are just kind of these very quick uppercut motions, which are good for dealing with hordes. I believe this weapon does more damage than the Great Hammer and is a little bit faster, at least with the kind of side-to-side attacks, which is really, really good, making this weapon just a cut above the rest. So that's my list, guys. S tier, I've got the Cog Hammer. A tier, I've got the Great Hammer and the dual hammers. B tier, I've got the hammer and the Great Axe. C tier, I've got the axe and shield and the hammer and shield. And then down in D tier, I've got the regular axe and the Warpick. Let me know what you guys thought of this tier list, what you would change, what you would, I don't know, what you disliked, what you disagreed, what you thought was correct. I want to hear it all in the comments down below. Thank you. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, click that notification bell, and hey, maybe join my Discord. Link will be in the description down below. Take care, guys.